All right, back to Darrell. Now, Darrell, your question is, can we save ourselves, and if so, how would we do it? And my answer to you is this. I think there's a window, and by saving ourselves, we mean saving the republic, right? Because it'd still be America. It's not going to disappear. It's just going to be a different kind of country. It's already a post-constitutional country, I've said, but we're moving further and further toward the type of top-down, centralized authoritarianism that is extremely difficult to reverse. So, my answer is, there's a lot of things a real leader could do. First, he should give a speech to the American people, not the kind of putrid demagoguery that we get from Obama, but a serious speech about the country. And an explanation to the American people that things are going to have to be done that likely will affect everybody because the federal government is ubiquitous, but that we are on a sure road to our own self-destruction, and that we need to reverse course, and we will attempt to reverse course in the most humane and rational ways possible. And the president then would talk about the entitlements. He would make it clear that people currently relying on these entitlements who planned for them, and I'm speaking in particular about Social Security and Medicare and veterans benefits, that they will be unaffected. But like Paul Ryan has said, people who are really 8 to 10 years away from receiving these benefits are going to see reductions or changes in these programs because otherwise there will be no programs. Also, I think the president should talk about this mentality where successful people are maltreated by the government, where successful people are targeted by federal bureaucrats and departments, and that this will come to an end, that every single regulation has to be reviewed now. We're not going to rush them out the door and try and beat some election cycle, election clock, that way of running the federal government is going to come to an end immediately. Also, that all federal departments and agencies over the next year to two are going to suffer 20% reductions, except for those that are involved in the vital requirements of a federal government, that is national security and internal security, the FBI, Border Patrol, military, and so forth. That is the primary function of government, and that function of the federal government, and that function cannot be undertaken by the private sector or the states in an effective way. It's why we have a nation to begin with. As for all the other departments, I would say there will be no travel unless it's essential. There will be no additional vehicles unless they're absolutely essential. All that kind of stuff will stop. I would also point out that no positions will be filled as a way of reducing the pain on current people who are employed in the federal government. I would point out that incomes and benefits are going to have to be tailored in a way that are more more similar to that which exists in the private sector, and therefore more realistic. And I would also abolish a number of departments. I would tell the American people we cannot afford a Department of Education that's not in the business of education. We cannot afford a Department of Energy that's in the business of stopping the production of energy. I would also issue mandates that would unleash well, you're asking me, I'm giving you a whole panoply here. I would also issue orders that my departments unleash our production of energy and stop trying to sabotage and obstruct what we need to do as a nation. We have an opportunity to truly be energy independent now, and in fact export energy, and we need to do it. I would stop the destruction of coal mines and the effort to drive up the price of electricity. I would, frankly, and this will upset some people, I'd eliminate this whole manipulation by the EPA and the radical environmentalists on ethanol and all the rest of it. If it can work, great. Then let it work in the private sector, that the American people, certainly when the country's going under financially, cannot afford it anymore. I would also set up a presidential committee, because I am not an expert on the Federal Reserve, of people who I respect, to really come up with some smart private sector centric alternatives or reforms to the Federal Reserve, I really don't think a relative handful of people should be making decisions about printing trillions and trillions of dollars of paper. I just have a problem with that. To me, it is inimical to a Republican form of government, and something it needs to be looked at very, very carefully, and dealt with not in a rash way, but in an intelligent way. And these are the sort of things. And then, of course, in addition to unleashing the private sector by deregulating the federal government, I would eliminate the current tax code, replace it with either a flat tax or the fair tax. I like them both. It would depend on what I could get through Congress, as I would promote a constitutional amendment in that respect, and get to the states and see if 3/4 of the states would approve it. So I'd have an extremely ambitious agenda. It would be what I would call, I'm just doing this off the top of my head, but I did write Liberty and Tyranny in Maritopia, so, I have done some work on these things. I would call it the Liberty Agenda or the Freedom Agenda, and as a way of restoring our republic. But I'd have this conversation with the American people, and I'd also make it clear to the American people, you ultimately get to decide if you want to live in liberty or tyranny. You ultimately get to decide if you want your children to be prosperous or not. You ultimately get to decide if you believe in capitalism or a top-down authoritarian type of management of the economy. I mean, ultimately, we have to decide if we want to continue the heritage that was granted to us from our forefathers, or if we want to lurch in a completely alien direction and dismiss over 200 years of national greatness.
Mark,
that's what I would do. There you go.
If I could interject one thing. I think people 3 years ago, or this past year and 4 years ago, decided contrary to the way we think. And I think we have sealed our fate with a at least minimal $24 trillion debt that cannot be repaid. And my point was, what do you think happens at the end of Obama's tenure, or the next 5 to 10 years, when the debt finally cannot be repaid, and the nations of the world decide we're not a good credit risk, and people will not accept Federal Reserve notes?
Darrell, all I can tell you is I'm not Nostradamus. All I can tell you is I think the next president has to do pretty close to what I'm talking about, not because Marx says so, but because this is where history, economics, philosophy, the culture take us. This is the direction we must go in order to begin to reverse course. What you're suggesting is if we can't reverse course in 5 years, it's over. You might be right. No prediction I make will matter one way or another, and the potential exists. It's not really a question of other countries not taking our notes. These other countries are going to be incapacitated as well, and they're not going to be in a position to help us even if we wanted them to help us. They're going to be struggling on their own because Western Europe is an absolute basket case. The truth is Red China one day will be a basket case because they're printing money left and right. The problem is they are a military-centric society, so they will do whatever they have to do to advance their cause militarily and so forth. So, but look, all right, my friend, thank you for your call. As for us paying off $20 trillion in debt, I hate to say this, it's actually more than that. Here's the problem, folks, with the entitlements. We don't begin to gradually address that and reform those. We have a $90 trillion fiscal operating and unfunded liability debt. In 10 years, that'll easily be, because that's growing by about anywhere from $4 to $7 trillion a year. Well, you can figure it out. We're going to be talking about 150, 180, 200 trillion dollars. I mean, that's the end. So, which is his point. So we can't afford to lose too many more elections. We cannot afford to nominate too many more mushheads. This is why, maybe if I'm a lone wolf in this business, so be it. This is why I take on the Karl Roves and take on the Republican leadership. because I know enough about history, and I see enough in the future, as all of you do too, that this cannot continue this way. Our lifestyles will not continue as they are, and we need to fix this. And these people who are in positions of power, and there's only a handful of them, relatively speaking, if they're not up to the job, they need to get the hell out of the way. And if they won't get out of the way, we got to move them the hell out of the way. So that's my view.